The marble floor gleamed beneath the chandelier's glow. A small girl lay, still, her skin pale, her lips silent. Beside her, a maid knelt, trembling, clutching something dark and wet that seemed to move. "What have you done?" Voice thundered. Mr. Thompson, the millionaire, stood frozen, horror flooding his face. But before anyone could speak, a small voice broke through the silence. The same voice no one had ever heard before. His daughter, who had been born deaf. That night something impossible began. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Who was this maid and what was she holding? How could a child who never heard a sound suddenly be? Was it truly a miracle or something else entirely? 4 years the Thompson family lived behind the tall iron gates of their mansion, surrounded by everything money could buy except the one thing that mattered most. Their daughter Lily had never heard her father's voice. Not the music that filled their home, not the lullabies her mother once sang. Silence was all she knew. When Grace, a quiet woman with a past no one spoke about, began working in the house, something began to change. The little girl who never smiled started to laugh. The one who never listened began to hum. And on one unforgettable night, everything shifted. Stay until the end, 'cause what Grace revealed that night will challenge everything you believe. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Mr. Caleb Thompson had everything a man could ever want. The kind of wealth that made headlines and the kind of house that seemed too quiet for its size. He was a man who believed that anything broken could be fixed if you just spent enough on it. But money, as he would learn, couldn't fix everything. His daughter Lily had been born deaf. He was 10 years old now, curious, clever, and full of life, yet trapped in silence. Every morning she'd sit by the window and watch the birds outside, smiling at their songs she could never hear. Caleb loved his daughter more than he could say, but he didn't know how to reach her. Conversations were limited to gestures, written notes, and the awkward space between them. He hired tutors, specialists, therapists from across the country, but nothing seemed to bridge that invisible wall between father and child. Then came Grace, the new maid. It wasn't like the others. Soft-spoken, thoughtful, always noticing the small things. When others avoided eye contact with the little girl, Grace sat with her. When others pied her silence, Grace treated it as something sacred. One afternoon, Caleb came home early and found them in the garden. Lily was laughing, not loudly, but with her whole body, her eyes bright, her hands moving in graceful patterns through the air. Grace was signing back, slow and patient. For the first time, Caleb saw his daughter not as a child broken by silence, but as a soul trying to speak in her own way. That night he couldn't sleep. The sound of Lily's laughter, silent to him, but alive in his memory, echoed louder than any noise he'd ever heard. The storm came without warning. Wind howled through the tall glass windows of the Thompson mansion, rattling the silence that usually filled its halls. At night, Lily lay in bed with a fever so high her small frame shook with every breath. Grace sat beside her, cloth in hand, whispering prayers she'd learned long before she ever entered this house. Hours passed. Doctors rushed in and out, their voices low and uncertain. "We've done everything we can," one of them finally said, his tone heavy with defeat. Caleb stood motionless, his hands clenched, his eyes red. "Everything you can," he repeated. "My daughter is dying and you tell me that's all." His voice broke. Then his fell on Grace. "You were supposed to look after her. How could you let this happen?" Grace didn't answer. Her tears were silent, falling onto Lily's hand as she tried to keep her composure. Everyone left the room one by one until only Grace and Lily remained. Air was thick, heavy with grief. Then Grace noticed something strange, a faint outline under the pillow. She hesitated, then slowly reached beneath it. Her fingers touched something small, smooth, and warm. She lifted it into the dim light. A dark stone, almost alive, pulsing faintly as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Grace had seen many things in her life, but never anything like it. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered that she had to. She placed the stone gently on Lily's chest, closed her eyes, and whispered a prayer, not out of logic, but out of love. "Please," she whispered, "if there's any mercy left in this world, don't take her." The moment her hand rested over Lily's heart, a faint sound broke the silence. Gasp. Grace froze. Lily's body twitched. Pulse weak, but there. Grace leaned closer, her hands trembling. "Lily," she whispered. The girl's lips parted. Tiny sound. Gape. A word barely audible, but it was there. Grace. Grace's tears came faster now. But what made her heart stop was not the word itself. It was when Lily opened her eyes, because they weren't the same color anymore. If this story has your heart racing, comment "I'm still watching" and see who's truly following till the end. Maid said miracles should bring peace. For Caleb, peace was the last thing he felt. Ever since that night, Lily had changed. Her hearing was back, but it wasn't the same. She said she could hear whispers, not voices exactly, but fragments of memories. "Daddy," she told him once. "Mom's voice sounds like the wind in the hallway." Caleb froze. His wife had passed years ago. He brushed it off, calling it recovery confusion. Every night, Lily woke up trembling, whispering things no one had told her. Things about her mother, about the day she died, things a 10-year-old couldn't possibly remember. First, Grace thought it was the medicine. When she entered Lily's room one night, she heard it too, faint like an echo, traveling through the walls. Grace told Caleb, but he dismissed it as nonsense. "She's just a child," he said. "You're filling her head with stories." Yet he avoided her eyes when he said it. Fear had settled in his voice. Later, the doctors returned, demanding to examine the strange object Grace had found under Lily's pillow. It could be medically significant, they insisted. Caleb almost agreed until he saw Grace step forward, holding the object tightly in her hand. "You can't take it," she said softly. "Belongs with her." The room fell silent. The doctors looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. But there was something unshakable in her voice, something maternal, protective. That night, the town began to whisper. Rumors spread fast in small places. Deaf girl who could now hear. A maid who prayed over her. A mysterious stone no one could explain, which someone muttered at the market. "Cursed," another said. Grace kept her head down, but she felt the stares. Still, she refused to leave. Her place, she believed, was by Lily's side. One evening, when the storm had quieted, and the air hung heavy with that strange peace that follows chaos, Grace slipped into the old chapel at the edge of the estate. The candles flickered weakly, their light barely reaching the cracked ceiling. She knelt, her hands trembling, her eyes wet. "I don't know what this means," she whispered into the emptiness. But please give me the strength to protect her. Whatever this is, let it be for good. The chapel was silent for a long moment. Then a breeze swept through, though every window was closed. Grace's candle flickered out. Meanwhile, Lily sat alone in her room, painting quietly. When Caleb entered, he stopped cold. The walls were covered in drawings, strange looping symbols, and shapes that looked ancient, familiar in a way he couldn't place. Where did you see these? He asked. Lily didn't look. In my dreams, she said softly. Mom showed me. Caleb's heart pounded. He wanted to yell, to demand an answer. But instead he just stared at the little girl, her brush moving steadily, her lips forming words he couldn't hear. For the first time he wondered if the miracle that had saved his daughter had come at a price. Tell me, if it were your child and you started hearing things that shouldn't exist, what would you believe? Would you call it a miracle or a warning? They say grief never truly leaves you, just changes the way it speaks. For Caleb, it spoke through silence. The silence of his daughter, the silence of a house filled with wealth but empty of warmth. But that night, when Lily finally spoke, when she called out, "Daddy!" for the very first time, he thought it was a miracle. Now, weeks later, he wasn't so sure. Something about Grace, the maid he'd accused, the woman who refused to leave, didn't fit into the story he told himself. Late one night, as the rain tapped against the study window, Caleb sat alone with an old family photo album. He turned each page slowly, the faces of his wife and daughter frozen in a time he could never return to. And then there she was, Grace, standing behind his wife, in a picture he'd never noticed before. Younger, smiling faintly, holding a tray. In the background, Caleb's breath caught in his throat. How could she have worked for his wife and never said a word? He confronted her the next morning, his voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. Grace's eyes dropped. "Because I didn't think it mattered anymore," she said softly. "I worked for her family years before you met her. It was kind to me. After she passed, I couldn't bear to see her things scattered." Caleb frowned, confused. "Then what was that object you found under Lily's pillow?" Grace hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black pearl locket, dull from age but unmistakable. Caleb's heart stopped. "That was hers," he whispered. "My wife's." Grace nodded. "I found it buried near the old chapel. I thought she would have wanted Lily to have it. I didn't know it would cause all this." Caleb sank into the nearest chair, staring at the locket in disbelief. For all his accusations, all his anger, the truth had been sitting quietly in Grace's hands. Not magic, not mystery, but love. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "All this time I thought money could fix her, fix everything, but it couldn't give her what she needed most." Grace knelt beside him, her voice trembling. "You gave her everything you knew how to give, sir. I only gave her love. The rest was never in my hands." The room fell silent. For the first time in years, Caleb felt the walls of grief often. He reached for the locket, holding it between his palms. It was warm. Or maybe that was just his tears falling onto it. In that quiet, he realized something that shook him to his core. Lily's healing hadn't come from science or miracles. Came from touch, connection, belief, the things money could never buy. Now tell me, if you lost someone you loved and found a small piece of them again in the hands of a stranger, what would you do? Would you call it coincidence or something greater? Sometimes the most powerful miracles don't come with thunder or light. They arrive quietly in the form a forgiveness, love, and faith. After everything the Thompson family had endured, the silence that once haunted their mansion had finally been replaced by something far greater. After months after the night Lily first spoke, her recovery was complete. Her doctors couldn't explain it, and Caleb no longer tried to. What mattered was that she was alive, and for the first time truly living. Every morning she'd hum softly to herself in the garden, her voice fragile but full of warmth, like a bird testing its wings. Grace would watch from the porch, smiling through tears. She'd never asked for recognition, never sought credit for what happened. But Caleb made sure she was never seen as a servant again. She was family now. The mansion that once echoed with emptiness was now filled with children's laughter. Caleb used his wealth to create something lasting, a foundation for children with hearing impairments. He named it Grace House, not for charity, but as a tribute to the woman who had taught him what love truly means. When the reporters asked why, he said quietly, "Because she reminded me that faith isn't something you buy. It's something you give." He no longer measured life in profits or possessions, but in moments. The sound of his daughter's giggle, the way Grace's hands still trembled when she prayed, the sunrise that broke through the same windows that once hid his grief. On Lily's 12th birthday, the three of them stood in the garden where it all began. Lily sang a small song she had written herself, a song about her mother, about the stars, and about never losing hope. Caleb's eyes filled with tears as Grace stood beside him, holding the old black pearl locket that had once caused so much pain. Now it rested peacefully in her palm, no longer a mystery, just a reminder that love never truly leaves us. And maybe that's the real miracle, not the ones that break the laws of nature, but the ones that mend the broken parts of our hearts. Because in the end, it wasn't medicine that healed her. It wasn't money or even ants. It was faith, not the kind written in books or preached in churches, but the kind found in hearts that refused to give up. And maybe, just maybe, that's something we all need a little more of. Now I want to ask you, if this story touched your heart, what part of stayed with you the most? Was it the father's redemption, the maid's faith, or the miracle that can't be explained? What would you have done if you were Grace? Would you have risked everything, your job, your name, your reputation, just to protect a child that wasn't even your own? Or would you have stepped aside, letting science and logic take over when faith seemed too fragile to hold on to? Stories like this make us question what we truly believe about miracles. Were they ever meant to be proven or simply felt? Maybe what happened to Lily wasn't supernatural maybe it was something far greater, a reminder that love, hope, and faith, when combined, can move hearts in ways the world can't explain. So I'll ask you again, do you believe in miracles, or was this something else entirely? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because next week you'll hear about a stranger's act of kindness that saved an entire village. Until then, remember this: some miracles aren't seen,